Hello, hello. I'm here today in the fan favorite, the Tier 9 American premium battleship, the USS Georgia. Now she's been around for a while. I did actually have a release video a while back when she was, well, freshly released, but obviously some time has passed since that point. That video never came out due to some recording issues where the audio quality was kind of poor. But nevertheless, here we are in the USS Georgia. So, Tier 9 American Premium, one of two at the moment, I believe, alongside the USS Missouri, and I guess a half-sister to the tech tree ship, the USS Iowa. Now, the USS Georgia is built on an Iowa derivative hull. Note that she looks very similar in silhouette to the Iowa, including the twin stacks. However, the stacks are spaced a little more further out, I believe, and if you look at her bow, you'll note that it's less sharply raked than that of the Iowa or Missouri, missing that kind of raked strake bow that you see on the Iowa and the Montana that comes after. The Georgia is, of course, kind of a middle evolution of the North Carolina / South Dakota. The Iowa is, of course, the Iowa hull is, of course, based on that of the Sodak NCAL, but stretched out somewhat in order to accommodate the increase in her top speed by 5 knots in reality. Now, obviously, in the real world, this had some consequences on her seakeeping and armor layout. She essentially has the same armor as the NCAL, the Iowa it is, but weighs some 10,000 tons heavier, as you see me punch that Neptune for a heavy Georgia Citadel, but we'll get to that in a second. But this is not reflected in the game. Now, in-game Georgia, just like the Iowa, has a fairly good top speed of about 33 knots, stock on her base hull. For a battleship, this is obviously quite impressive. However, she differs in her main armament, which you can immediately notice. You can see she has twin turrets in an ABX layout, so that's 3 twins, 2 forward and 1 aft. As you see me start gushing black smoke. Now this low barrel count is somewhat problematic at Tier 9, because this kind of gives her relatively uncompetitive DPM. However, you'll see her reload's fairly short, 26 stock, and her gun caliber is not the same as that of the Iowa. The Iowa has, of course, her infamous, or maybe famous, triple 406s, the long-barreled variant found on the Iowas, with the higher velocity for the shells compared to the NCAL and Sodaks. But the Georgia is using twin 457s, so that's 18-inch guns. Now, they don't quite have the true 32mm overmatch of the Musashi or Yamato's 460s, so do keep in mind that you still cannot overmatch 32mm armor. That is a talent reserved for Musashi, Yamato, and the upcoming, now at this point, Sakashima or Yashima, depending on which announcements you've been following. Ooh, Rune took a big hit there. But nevertheless, these American 457s still are quite the impressive gun. They have decent reach at 20 kilometers, not great though, and pretty low shell velocity. You can see the gun handling is fairly American in nature. So nice sluggish shells with lots of plunging fire. Bugle right in front of me. So my secondaries are gonna open up, but we'll get back to that in a second. Slowing down with my speed boost to dodge twin waves, and since he's smoked, I know he does not have a reload booster, so that torpedo threat is now over. So just gonna let my gun bloom fade. Just about to fade now, and we should go nicely into concealment. Now, in exchange for having that low barrel count, first off, the Georgia does have Alaska dispersion, so that's super cruiser dispersion, which is basically better than any other battleship in the game, including the Yamato. So she's extremely precise with her 6 shells, in spite of having only 6 shells. Secondly, her shell damage, as you saw earlier on that Neptune, is enormous at 15,700 alpha. This puts her as one of the highest shells in the game. Currently, I think it is the highest, but the Sakashima's, the upcoming Sakashima's 480s, or is it 480s? The upcoming Sakashima's 20-inch guns are going to displace that number. But for now, the Georgia, along with various other 457 hulls, such as the Ohio, do carry the highest per shell alpha in the game and a fairly reasonable reload of 26 seconds. Combine this with American battleships' access to artillery plotting room, and you get quite a wallop at range. Now the barrel count, as I mentioned, is prohibitive. It is gonna keep you from scoring massive broadsides. For example, I believe the Georgia, in spite of having much higher shell damage, still has lower broadside alpha than both the Missouri and the Iowa. But it does give you advantages such as 457 overmatch, which allows you to overmatch 30mm armor, which is a very relevant cruiser armor point. And in addition, just gives you a lot of punch over range. Now, as you saw earlier, I did pop my speed boost, which is one area where the Georgia differs from both the Missouri and the Iowa. She has fairly standard American consumables otherwise, though. She does have access to the Massachusetts fast reloading heal. See me kind of letting my shells go astray here. Was working on the flank, but I can't really do too much against the Yugumo. Kind of trading down at the moment, so I'm gonna need to get a little closer. But anyhow, speed boost. Georgia is a battleship with a speed boost. The battleship with a 33 knot stock speed with a speed boost, and this is not a destroyer speed boost, this is a full-on French cruiser speed boost of 15%. As you can see me shove some shells into the nose of that enemy Georgia. So it's a 15% speed boost with the special module. You can get to the last 270 seconds, and this means the Georgia can reach a speed of up to, well, 40 knots, just about. I think it's actually like 39.5. As my speed boost does time out, you're going to see my speed tick down a little bit. But what this speed boost does do, in addition to providing, well, an enormous amount of raw speed, is that it allows you to move around the map very quickly. And even though the Iowa hull is not exactly the most responsive, you have a fairly large turning circle and sluggish rudder shift. When the speed boost is running, you get a fairly quick-moving battleship that actually responds pretty well to rudder. You can see that Brindisi on the edge of my range, 20 kilometers, compared to the Iowa and Missouri, is a bit on the short side. My Alaska does dispatch him. You can, of course, alleviate this with the use of a spotting plane. Looks like Yugumo's inside of the cap. But I'm choosing to run a, what's it called? A fighter plane at the moment, so don't have access to that. Switched over to HE using Expert Loader. I am, of course, running Halsey, so no reason not to. I'm still at full health, so I should probably get in there and fight. Now, earlier you saw my secondaries go off very briefly. This is, of course, the Georgia secondaries. She has the same secondary layout as a Massachusetts, which means she gets the improved dispersion and improved range. Right now with no upgrades other than, I believe, secondary module in slot 2, I'm sitting at 9.4, and you can comfortably get it up to 11.3. I know there's a Yugumo here, but I dodged his torps, so popping my speed boost, which has come back up, I'm going to engage my counterpart. Now, the Iowa is not particularly heavily armored, so you do want to stay angled, especially against an enemy Georgia here. He's secondary spec, so I do need to close the range in order to match him. You can see his secondary is going off first, at about 10 kilometers, so he does have some module advantages over me. He pops fire, but I remember I have that fast reloading Georgia heal, so I'm just going to pop it immediately. Looks like he's going to give me broadside at some point, so I'm going to bring my turrets around. For 457s, they are fairly responsive. Do manage to dodge out onto Yugumo's torpedoes, for the most part. However, after taking one with its enormous Japanese alpha, it's going to force me to pop my damage control, which is unfortunate. These secondaries are going to light me up quite a bit. I have the AP loaded now, kind of aiming at the bow. Looks like it wasn't the right option for where to aim. Select that Yugumo as my secondary target. As we close, I'm going to keep my secondaries on target. Oh, fail to secure a good angle. Time to pop a second heal though. Bring my rear guns around. Ooh, some more shells. Looks like everyone but the Georgia is shooting me now. Now Rune is normally a fairly heavily armored battleship, or a cruiser rather. However, against my 457s I kind of overmatch all of that armor, so maybe it's going to sit around like that. No need to be too concerned. I have taken a large amount of damage from fires and such. So I'm going to try and use what's left of my speed to disengage and see even against Rune's fairly capable shells at long distances. I'm able to slide out, and with that fast reloading Massachusetts heal, I am going to actually take a heal, hopefully before I take too much damage from this Rune. I'm going to disengage at this point. Still spotted by the Yukumo sadly, but as long as I don't get another fire tick, I am going to be able to safely disengage and make use of my heals. And slip away with my high speed. You can see even fully maneuvering, I'm at a fairly competent 28 knots of speed. Fast reloading heal means in another 25 seconds I'll be able to get back up to 5-digit health. There's an Ismo and Baja hanging out back here with me. I kinda do want to threaten this cap again. So with that in mind, I'm gonna start turning my guns. Now you saw during that engagement with the enemy Georgia, they don't turn the greatest in terms of traverse. Pop another heal, have one more after. Now unlike the Iowa, which has access to the tech tree heal, which is improved in terms of how much she can heal, the Georgia is running the mass heal, which means it's just a standard heal. Alright, there's that Yukumo. Probably not worth expert loadering. I'm gonna just rely on my speed, hug the corner. It might actually be worth using expert loader if he's gonna try and YOLO me. You can see that sluggish Turtover struggling to stay together. 6 km or 6k off of him. Gonna just use this hard cover. And you can see my secondaries are kind of doing some decent work. Speed boost is down at this point. Hoping for a fire. My secondaries go offline in terms of angle. Yukumo still hunting me. Pop a heal to squash his hopes. And hopefully bring my secondaries back online. Gonna pop a fighter. Squeeze off the last 2 shots. And I am gonna frag him, which is good. Switching back to high explosive at this point. There's an Ismo looking at me. Keep my bow pointed at its last known. Popped the heal a little early. I could have waited for a little more healing potential, but I was concerned about my life. So that is why I decided to pop it. Now, I'm not the best Georgia pilot, but you can see there that fast reloading heal does bail you out of a lot of trouble, which you really don't get to say about too much. Now I'm going to broadside that Ismo potentially by going blind here, so firing at the rune is fairly risky. I can very easily take that 30,000 damage from a high velocity anti-battleship Ismo with her 16-inch guns, but looks like Mr. Border Slider is not doing so hot over there. And with the use of my speed boost, able to quickly get out of range. Now I have those 457s, but again, remember I don't have 32mm overmatch as I slide back into the cap, so not exactly the most ideally equipped do get 1 pen through probably superstructure. And might get Gazi team kills, but does get a Yugumo as well. And you can see, even with kind of semi-sloppy play and without playing with the majority of my team, thanks to my extremely high speed, I'm able to operate very alone. Without too much support, use that speed to disengage in spite of my relatively subpar 13-kilometer concealment. And that package of speed and maneuverability, along with pretty potent secondaries which should force a confident destroyer player to stay out of the way, though that seems not to have convinced the Yugumo, as you saw. That allows us to kind of stay alive and just hook ourselves up with what looks to be a victory. The rest of my team, which went around the south side, does seem to have managed to pull this game back from the brink. We resecured the caps, and at this point, I'm just probably going to finish the game just shy of 100,000 damage, which is obviously not great for a high-tier battleship. But we'll see if we can see the Ismo again before this game times out, or maybe get some damage in on this 9k HP Ismo. Now if you watch my shells traverse over the course of the 20-kilometer range, you can see they are fairly slow. That classic American plunging arcs, and I'm gonna steal that kill for myself and punch over 100,000 just at the very end. Here on Crash Zone Alpha, it was a tier 9 game if I didn't mention that. So, fairly fair display of the Georgia's power. Can I get these shells to land before the game ends? Probably not, so I'm going to switch back to armor piercing. In anticipation of the game ending, looks like he's sliding to the side. So my shells are going to miss, but you can see that nice tight cluster at the end of the shell arc. And there you have it, a very middle of the pack performance at 100,000 damage, 42 shell hits, 6 endcaps, 2 kills, 5 fires, 1 citadel, 1 capture, and 92 secondary hits. Team score wise, pretty up there in spite of my relatively mediocre performance, probably due to the capping experience, also the mostly solo kill on the Yugumo. Detailed report. Mix of HE and AP. Of course, as a battleship, you are going to mostly be shooting AP in most circumstances. This is not exactly British. And then, fairly high amount of damage from the secondaries, actually. That Yugumo at close range did take a nice chunk, and as well, when we were doing that Georgia pass by that I will admittedly say I kind of failed at, you can see that we did another 7.6k. So, the secondaries, while being quite impressive, since they are the same as those found on the Massachusetts, which is a secondary monster, are not nearly so effective at the Georgia's tier, even though they're the same, if not better, because of the fact that the Georgia sees tier 9s, which means that outside of seeing tier 7s, most of the time your secondaries won't deal any damage to any ships, even with IFHE. The Massachusetts, on the other hand, if she takes IFHE and happens to be top tier, can pen basically all of the non-tier 8 battleships in her matchmaking bracket, so her secondaries get to perform much better in terms of their direct damage dealing capacity. In a similar vein, destroyer caliber guns at tier 10, such as those on the Smolensk and the Colbert, for example, do struggle somewhat in terms of actual alpha damage against heavily armored targets for the same reason. They're too low caliber, and of course the Georgia's secondaries are 127s or 5-inch guns, so they suffer from those same issues. Damage received, 95,000 with 1.8 potential, so nothing too special there, but do note that I did manage to burn through all my heals thanks to that improved Massachusetts heal. So the Georgia there kind of showing off how, with speed and a powerful, fast reloading heal, you can get a lot more done than you otherwise might think on the relatively squishy Georgia hull of 74,000 health. Anyhow, heading back to port. This Georgia replay has been a long time coming, so let's get it out of the way. This is Georgia. As I mentioned, she doesn't have that raked bow of the Missouri. If you go to the Missouri here and the Iowa, you can see this raked bow that in life was meant to enhance her speed. The Georgia, on the other hand, has a rather stubby bow, which kind of doesn't make any sense at all if you note the fact that she does 40 knots for her speed boost. It is, of course, the bow she inherits from the North Carolina and Alabama. Let me find a less Christmassy bow. So this is the Alabama's bow, and you can see it shares the same shape as the Georgia. The Georgia is kind of an interim evolution between the North Carolina and Iowa that never existed in life, so she keeps her North Carolina bow in spite of her immense speed. There, of course, are the twin 457s. And then that Massachusetts secondary arrangement, 5 twin turrets per side. Kind of hard to see with the contrast, sorry. But there they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Other soft stats aside, it is an Iowa hull, so she has fairly good AA. It's an American battleship after all, lots of Bofors mounts, and then the twins, of course, that we mentioned. But overall, slightly worse than the Iowa and Missouri. Now, for module loadout, you of course have standard damage control, Massachusetts heal, spotter or fighter. I'm using fighter because I find extra range to be kind of nonsense with the slow shells and relatively low shell grouping. You can, of course, put on the spotter and still hit targets at her maximum extended range of about 22 to 23 kilometers, but I don't find it to be necessary. With the secondaries and speed, which allows you to close the gap and also inflict a bit of extra damage up close anyway, the Georgia prefers to sit at more medium to close ranges compared to the Iowa and Missouri. So I take fighter. So in order of priority, probably heal, damage control, speed boost, and then fighter if you want it. Upgrade wise, fairly standard. You only have 3 twin turrets, so keep them online as long as possible with main armaments. Then, if you have one, you can take a speed boost module, an engine boost modification 1, available in the armory for coal. If not, take damage control system modification 1. But extending that speed boost, which allows you to go up to 40 knots of speed, is definitely a huge benefit. Then in slot 3, of course, because the Georgia does have the secondaries, which are actually quite useful, you can take secondary battery modification 1. If you don't really care about the secondaries that much, they are kind of a meme anyway. They do a small amount of damage, but they're not that important. You can either take a potting room for extra range, which also extends your secondary battery by a little bit. Or you can take main battery mod 2. Her turrets are kind of sluggish, as I did mention, so it is something you can explore if you want to ignore the Georgia's secondary gimmick entirely and just focus on her very potent main battery. In slot 4, very easy damage control system, which extinguishes fires and floods. However, if you do want it, because she's so maneuverable, rudder shift is actually not bad. She has a base rudder shift that's fairly long at 16.5, so cutting that by 20% down to 13 is not a horrific choice. Slot 5, target concealment systems in order to let you to disengage when necessary, as you saw there. Her speed and rapid access heals does mean that if you disengage, you are likely to survive if you do it properly, so this makes disengaging easier, and it allows you to sneak up on your opponents and keeps your detection down to a usable 13.3. And last but not least, I prefer additional accuracy. Now, if you do intend to brawl and go more secondary range, there is an argument to be made for reload module, or main battery mod 3, but on most of my high tier Americans, I prefer to just maximize the accuracy. The Georgia has that Grash Bay Alaska supercruiser dispersion anyway, so maximizing it where possible is my preferred mode of action. And then secondary module is funny, but I wouldn't recommend it. Captain wise, I'm using Halsey. This is my shared captain for my Missouri, Alaska, Georgia, Montana, and potentially on the Salem as well, although the Salem does prefer a slightly different Des Moines captain. But this is my preferred spec. So, priority target, into Adrenaline Rush, into Superintendent. Remember, those fast loading eel charges are really easy to burn through. And then Fire Prevention. So that's your base 10. After that, probably go back for Expert Marksman. and expert loader first, so that's 13, and then I would go for concealment. Concealment is less useful for sure than it used to be due to the carrier metagame, so that's just my preference, but if you want to go for concealment immediately after or even concealment before fire prevention, that's up to you. That's entirely up to you. And then round out the build with Jack of all trades to help reduce the cooldown on your heal further and also reduce the cooldown on your speed boost and damage control. And with that said, there you have it. That is the Georgia, available in the armory for coal, of course, or from the shop if you want a whale. I'm not gonna stop you if you have the financial means to do so. But yeah, the Georgia is a ton of fun. I'm not a huge battleship kind of person, as you saw there during that replay. Kind of clowned around on the border for a bit too long, staying at the edge of my range in spite of being more of a medium range specialist. But the Georgia is an excellent tier 9 battleship for coal, and with the Jean Bart leaving soon, she'll probably be one of the better choices left in the shop for coal. So, if you like the fast battleship style, and you're looking for something a bit unique, but you don't have the steel for something like a Bourgogne with 30,000 steel commanding price, the Georgia is a good second alternative, and she definitely is a fun one. I hope you enjoyed the commentary, and I will catch you all later. Cheers!